UR Technical Support. So today I want to answer a question that our sales guys get asked about how to protect walkways and vulnerable areas with our cobots. So here we have a mimic of an application where we're doing a pick and place. So if I just press play on the robot's just going to go and pick and place. But what happens is if we had a situation where this was a walkway and somebody actually programmed the robot to come out into the walkway. So now I'll change the program. So if I'll just discard that, go to here. Press play. So now it's going to do exactly the same thing, but it's going around the base joint. So now it's coming out into the walkway. So we want to prevent that from happening. Okay, so to prevent the robot actually going out into the walkway, what we need to do is reference the safety and reference a safety plane that's going to prevent the robot from doing that. So the safety system on the UR actually has 17 Category 3 Performance Level D safety functions, but we're not going to go through every single one or through the settings. We actually cover that in core training. So the first thing I need to do is make myself a feature that I can then reference in safety. So I'm just going to press free drive on the robot and I'm going to move the robot around. So imagine the end of the tool flange, this is where I'm going to build that virtual brick wall. So imagine it's on the end of the tool flange and it's an infinite safety plane. So now I can go into into features, and the first thing I need to do is make myself a feature point. So I can click on point and I can teach that point. So it's just like teaching a waypoint. And it's always good practice to rename things. So I'm just going to call that walkway. Perfect. So now I can go into safety and I can reference that in the safety. So I want to click on safety, add my safety password, which on this robot is URSafe. And these are the 17 functions. So if we look at robot limits down to 3 position switch, they're the 17 Category 3 Performance Level D functions. But I'm just going to quickly go into planes. And then I want to add a plane, and I want to reference it to that walkway feature I've just made. So I'll click on walkway. So here we can have the restrictions. So on my restrictions, I can either trigger reduce mode when my tool flange touches that point, or I'm going to leave it at both so the robot will never go past that point. That's both in free drive and in program. And if we look where my virtual plane is, it's almost touching the tool flange. So I actually just want to displace it. So if I displace it 150 millimeters, it just moves it away, just so we've got some clearance. So don't worry too much about where you actually set your initial feature. We can always displace the safety plane later. Perfect. So now I'm going to apply that, and I'm going to apply and restart. So what the robot's going to do, it's going to ask me to confirm those safety settings in a second. So it asked me to confirm those, and now I can initialize the robot. It probably takes about 30 seconds just to initialize the robot. Perfect. Now I can release the brakes. Perfect. So now I can take my robot back to roughly the start of the program. I can go into here, and this is where I need to reactivate the gripper because I've gone into safety. So I obviously rebooted the robot. So the first thing I need to do is just reactivate my gripper so it works in my program. Now if I press play on the program, the robot's going to come down, it's going to try and move, and it's going to stop. It's going to actually stop with a protective stop. So just enable that, switch the conveyor off. Okay, thanks for watching. Next time we'll show you some more features on the UR robot.
This week's application spotlight is all about 2 robots working together in harmony. We've mounted a UR3E robot on the end of a UR20 to make a 12-axis robot. On the end of the UR3 is a sensor part vision system, which is being driven into inaccessible areas by the robots working together. All the axes are working together through the Polyscope software. This kind of application opens up new possibilities for inspecting inside fuselages or inside car bodies as this per application. There are many, many applications for inspection systems and scanning systems where this would be useful for. And having two robots working in complete harmony together gives you complete 12-axis of control. If you'd like to find out any more about this, contact Universal Robots. Hi, welcome back to the Cobot channel. This week we're joined by Dr. James Law from Sheffield University. Hi James.
Hi.
James, can you tell us a little bit more about your role and what your team does at the university?
Yeah. So I'm a Senior Innovation Fellow at the University of Sheffield, and I have a joint appointment between the Department of Computer Science and the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre's Integrated Manufacturing Group, the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre being part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. I'm also the Director of Innovation and Knowledge Exchange at Sheffield Robotics, which is a Sheffield-based network research group, all looking at robotics, different aspects of robotics, different application areas, really broad-ranging all the way from the design of electromechanical systems through to looking at the societal impacts of robotics.
So quite a wide area that you're looking at.
Very, very wide area. And my role between computer science and the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre is really to look at opportunities for translating the low TRL technology readiness level research that we do by academics on the main campus of the university out to industry through the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre.
Excellent, excellent. And what do you think is driving the need for automation in the UK right now? What sort of main societal factors are driving people to start looking at automating?
Well, I think there's been interest in automation for a long time, and we've seen huge applications areas, particularly in the automotive sector. But the traditional approach to automation in manufacturing has been very much focused on the high value, high volume manufacturing, which is very much automotive. And as the technologies develop, I think there's a real interest in pulling robotics and automation into more bespoke manufacturing. Whether that's high volume and low value, high value, low volume, things that might be in the nuclear sector perhaps, but also looking at automating tasks which might have been traditionally manual but have been too complex for traditional automation, but where those jobs are dull, dirty, repetitive, not the kind of jobs that people want to be doing.
Yes, and I suppose the demographics of our country at the moment is driving that as well. There are people, it's an ageing workforce, we're trying to get younger people into manufacturing, and that gap, I suppose, is driving the need for automation as well.
Yeah, so we are hearing a lot from companies who, as you say, their workforce is aging, it's retiring. They're finding it difficult to replace some of the skilled, very kind of craft-based jobs that they have, and people coming into the workforce are very much getting more au fait with new technologies, interested in things like AI and robotics, and want to be using those in the workplace. We're also seeing changes with the ageing demographic in impacts on things like healthcare. So where we have a small number of healthcare workers, people to support those people that want to live longer in their own homes, perhaps, looking at ways of automating some of the tasks that are done in the care world as well, to take some of that burden off the existing care workers.
Pressure off, yeah. One of the things that we see in the UK is that when we look at Germany, they've got a higher robot density per manufacturing workforce, and we're quite conservative about that. The traditional sort of thoughts are robots are going to take jobs, but if you look at the productivity rate for Germany and the robot density, their productivity is higher than ours, and they've got higher robot density. So do you think there could be some link to that as opposed to where we are now in the UK with productivity rates?
So my understanding for the changes, because it's also similar in I think places like Singapore and South Korea, where the manufacturing sector is really aimed at high volume, in some of those high value as well, export markets, which we do less of in the UK. In the UK, more of a service-based economy.
Yes.
The manufacturing we do is more bespoke as well. So I think we have been, in some ways, not in such a good position to take on automation as some of those other countries have. But I think the shift to more collaborative ways of working with robots and the changes that are happening with the technology, the advances coming through, I think they're going to start suiting the UK kind of manufacturing sector much more than the more traditional.
We'll see those benefits quicker, I guess, yes. And how can manufacturers such as Universal Robots and institutions like yours help create a pathway for people into this route of automation? How can we make it easier for people to adopt this and find out more about it?
So, I mean, there are several challenges on the adoption side. Knowledge and information, I think, is one. We talked to a lot of people who don't even know where to start when it comes to deploying robots in their production lines. Those organisations who are used to kind of more traditional approaches to automation understand that way, but they don't understand what they could potentially do with collaborative robots so well. But there are also a lot of organisations, particularly SMEs, who are really keen to get into robotics, but they have quite, say, those bespoke processes. They have very low overheads. They're coming into this afresh, and they don't understand even where to start looking. So I think engaging and disseminating information through organisations like Universal Robots, the suppliers, but also the universities, things like the Advanced Manufacturing Catapult. I think there needs to be more done there to raise awareness of what can be done, and also the limitations of the technology. Because we do see people who are going out and trying to buy robots for their processes without really thinking through all the implications of that and the challenges that might come with that.
Exactly, and that's one thing that we're really passionate about, is we want to try and keep people on this pathway to success. We don't want it to be, something that they're going to have to buy and then look at redeploying because it didn't work for the original application. And that's a lot of it is about, as you say, it's knowledge about what's available and how they do that. So yeah, raising that knowledge and awareness, I suppose, is like our duty as institutions to be able to let people know what they can and can't do and share as much knowledge as possible. Do you think there's a more conservative attitude to robot safety in the UK as opposed to in Europe? Do you think there is a sort of disconnect with that, perhaps?
I think so. Certainly, in looking at the approaches to safety and the projects, the research that's going on in robot safety in Europe, I think there's been a lot more of that, and there's been, I think, a lot more effort by certain organisations, certainly within Europe, to look at deploying collaborative robots in slightly more novel ways. The discussions that I've had with potential users in the UK have been a little bit more conservative. We're concerned about how to deploy those robots safely, particularly in line with the standards that we have at the moment.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You touched on some of the research that's quite broad that you're involved in. Is there any particular research that you're involved in that's purely aligned with cobots, with collaborative robots, and how they can be adopted?
So a lot of the research within my group is specifically on human-robot collaboration, and how we increase trust in that collaboration. And trust is quite a complex thing. Now, there's a lot of interest in trust at the moment, but that is, I think, a key part of that adoption piece as well. So it includes things like the safety, which you've mentioned, the security of data, of information, of those processes as well. So colleagues of mine are always saying in the safety world that you can't have safety without security, for example. But there's also issues about the communication with those systems, how intuitive they are to use, the interaction that you have as a user, the intuitiveness of the system. So I think the complexity of robotics and automation, I think, does put some people off and does put them a little bit unease. But there are also concerns amongst the general public about AI and the implication for that on jobs, the displacement of work through automation, that we need to address. So there are societal issues as well, and policy and regulation and things all go hand in hand with this issue of trust.
Yeah. And with Universal Robots opening their office in Sheffield, we've picked Sheffield to be our UK base. What kind of opportunities do you think that opens up for the future for Sheffield, if you like, with regards to making it more of a city that's more open to robots, perhaps?
Well, so I'm really keen that you've come here. I think it's absolutely fantastic for the city and for the wider region as well. We obviously have a really strong history in Sheffield of manufacturing, and that's one of our real strengths within the university. We have the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, and robotics and automation is one of the areas where we see real value, real opportunities. So the integrated manufacturing group where I sit, a big chunk of their work is specifically focused at robotics and automation and developing or helping organisations develop those new processes, test out ideas, and de-risk those kind of opportunities. Yeah. So I think we have a cluster forming in the region of people interested in robotics, interested in getting those into the workplace, not only in manufacturing but in healthcare, in medical, in construction and logistics as well, yeah. And in infrastructure inspection and maintenance. So there's a real lot of activity going on in robotics right now in the region. So I think it's fantastic.
And it's quite interesting, isn't it? As you've got one sort of organisation and another joins, it tends to share a lot of information between and raise awareness, and it manages to do that quicker, I would say, rather than just being one individual or one organisation on their own. So that's one of the reasons why we came here. One of the things I want to ask you is, are there any sectors of industry where you think cobots could be used, where automation's traditionally been deemed too complex? Are there any sort of particular sectors that you think that cobots have just never been considered, that it might open up a new aspect of productivity for them?
Yeah. So I mean, there are several areas.
Yeah.
I've mentioned the kind of healthcare
yeah.
sector as a big opportunity, and we're seeing a lot of efforts in that space at the moment. And there is a real need for that close human-robot collaboration and kind of physical interaction, particularly if you're looking at assistive tasks.
Yes.
So, for example, caring for people in their homes, helping them get dressed, medications, helping them move around their homes, bring them the items that they need, perhaps. We're also seeing real opportunities in areas like pharmaceuticals, where yes, in the actual production of the pharmaceuticals, we may have automation, but actually in the science behind the development of those. So in the research laboratories, conducting those scientific experiments, where they're highly repetitive, but they are environments designed for humans, and they have scientists and lab technicians going around doing quite repetitive tasks in some instances, but where collaborative robots could certainly help.
From what we've seen, we've sold robots into those kind of sectors, and naturally you think they have great productivity, but actually it's the opposite. They don't have a great deal of productivity, and robots can actually do more for them, so it's quite interesting. Are there any particular task groups that you think are good for cobots in manufacturing? We talk about applications a lot, but we disseminate between the difference between tasks and applications. And you talked about the dirty, dangerous and dull. Are there any particular task groups that you think are particularly suited for cobots? We've seen a big range in material removal for sanding, for instance, but are there any others that you think are starting to open up to collaborative robots?
So I think we're quite well aware, and you'll be aware of things like the adhesive applications, of welding, of screwing. I think there is, and you talk about sanding as well, and finishing. So there are those. Where I see real opportunity is where we can really marry the capabilities of the robot, so the repeatability, the accuracy, the speed, the precision, the lifting capabilities, and marry that with the cognitive and perceptual abilities of the humans, which the robots don't have. So really marrying the human skills with the robot skills and making the best of both worlds. I think there's a massive opportunity there, but at the same time, it's not clear exactly how to do those tasks or where that fits. And I think there needs to be more done in collaboration with people like yourselves,
yeah.
universities, and the end users to try and identify actually where those real winners are.
Yes.
I think there's a huge opportunity, but I don't think we're quite there yet in understanding, how we can tackle those.
So it's like exactly blending tasks in cells together with robots and people together.
And I think because we're going through that period of change now, and although collaborative robots are not new, they are still fairly early in their adoption in industry. And I think as that develops, and the industrialists, the application users and holders understand more about the capabilities of the robot, I then think we'll start to see those new ideas come
Yes, there's more and more sort of obscure tasks now being automated. We touched on it a little bit before. AI is a big thing in the news at the moment, but do you see many benefits for linking AI to cobots in sort of operation of manufacturing? We've seen them linked with camera systems for sorting and so on, but do you see any sort of AI applications where cobots would be able to gain from that kind of reinforced learning, if you like?
Yeah, so I think there's huge opportunities. It has to be done carefully, it has to be done responsibly.
Yes.
But there are huge opportunities, particularly in going back to that ease of use and that how we build trust and confidence in systems. So, for example, I have colleagues who are using machine learning and AI approaches to tackle security challenges and identify weaknesses in security systems around entire robot processes. I have colleagues who are using AI machine learning methods to tackle the verification of processes and the testing of processes to ensure that your robot is always going to do exactly what you think it's going to do and you're not going to have any surprises. We're working with the University of York a lot on safety of robots, and they're using kind of machine learning approaches to try and identify how we can overcome some of the safety barriers. You've mentioned machine vision, for example. And then also in terms of how we make robots easier to train to different processes and how we make them more flexible in adapting to tasks. So there's a lot of interest at the moment in using AI to have robots learn on the job and from human operators as well, to be able to refine their processes, improve on those tasks, and transfer tasks from one process to another where that's not currently possible.
So it's almost like a human learning a skill. It takes you a long time to be really good at something.
Exactly.
The same with a robot doing the same thing over and over again until it gets better at it. And one of the things I want to ask you about as well, we see as cobots start to open up automation of tasks that can improve welfare of humans. So it might be lifting from the end of a production line, or like you say, grinding or removing material. You think that how people are going to see physical work change and how our attitudes to work has changed? Because one of the difficult things at the moment is trying to recruit people into the manufacturing industry. We have something like 76,000 open posts, and the manufacturing industry are now looking at humans are really their biggest asset, so they want to retain them. Do you think that we're going to have a different attitude to physical work and what we'd expect people to do and what we'd expect robots to do?
Yeah, I think so. Some of the organisations that I've been working with have been specifically interested in deploying robots in those tasks which are detrimental to human health. And so they're looking at exactly that problem. I think there's a huge opportunity. And I do think, yes, that we will see that shift. One of the things, though, I think we have to be very conscious of is the people whose roles are changing and how the deployment of jobs and the deployment of robots and the adoption of them will change work and what that means to those individuals. Often we see people not fully consulted on those, not part of the deployment and adoption process, and that leads to concerns, and it leads to, in some cases, some quite hostile reaction to the deployment of robots. And that, I think, is something that we need to address to make sure that when we are putting robots into processes, that they are doing exactly what we would hope they would do in the way that we'd hope to do them to increase that productivity and make the most of those deployments.
Yes.
So I think there is a piece of work there to be done as well.
I think to get staff to understand the benefits and understand why the robots have been brought in, because we've always seen the use of technology to improve people's lifestyles, both at work and all the other sort of things that we do. So I guess that's one of the ways that we need to make people aware of it. It's coming in to make their jobs easier. It's not something that's going to replace them or it's going to actually make them work harder. It's actually going to make them work smarter, I suppose. That's the message I get.
Yeah. So one of the things that we know from our work with partner organisations is it's not simply a case of trying to get people to understand or telling them that these robots are going to improve their jobs. It's actually involving those people in the process, so they have first-hand understanding of those changes and why they're happening, but also so they can feed in their own concerns and that they can be addressed as part of that process.
Yeah. It's interesting because as cobots become more widely accepted, do you think that's going to bring in more job opportunities for people in the UK as we start to reshore and also we're going to need people who can install robots and program robots, so that creates a new classification of engineer, if you like. Do you see that as something that's going to expand for the future? Yeah,
so the data that I've seen from the studies shows that counter to some concerns that the adoption of robots actually is increasing the number of jobs. And as you say, those jobs are changing. So they are looking more at the skills around the deployment, the programming of the robots. So it does look like robots will bring new jobs. They'll bring increasing productivity, and then organisations will be able to grow further through that. So yeah, I see that, but there will be, I think, some changes in the jobs that are undertaken as well.
Yeah, that's changed with any technology that comes into any manufacturing business, I guess. One of the things I want to ask you about as well is we've heard a lot about digital twins, and how can companies see benefits from trialling something in a digital twin environment before adopting a cobot or putting something into their process?
So digital twins, I think, are going to be a really useful, really powerful technology. And just to clarify, so when I talk about digital twins, my colleagues talk about twins, we're talking about virtual representations of physical systems where the virtual and the physical worlds have exactly the same state, so they're mirroring one another, where they're communicating bi-directionally, so it's not just a one-way transfer of information, and they're working in real time, whatever real time is for your particular application. They're really powerful in terms of allowing you to access information from your physical system that you might not have access to directly off of that. So by using models and simulations internally in your twin, you can perhaps explore parameters of your physical system that you wouldn't be able to just measure directly. But they do give us great opportunities. So we're working at the moment with digital twins, looking at how they can be used to design, simulate, model a process offline in a virtual world, validate your design, but then also control your physical process. So you can identify exactly what equipment you might need, put that down on your shop floor, and then plug it into your twin, and then directly run your physical system off of your twin with the programmings and the controls that you've already developed. Use that not only to control, but also to monitor your processes.
And I guess that's really appealing because it's stopping any disruption to the shop floor. You know, you're trying this before you're actually implementing it. So that's really appealing to people who want to be able to try a technology without huge disruption.
Yeah, and I think it's about trying to minimise the number of steps required in that deployment adoption process, but also give people the tools to trial things and really reduce the time it takes to design and deploy, test those systems.
One last question. Are there any developments that you think in the future will change the way that we work with robots together?
Oh, that's a tough.
It's quite an open question, that's why I asked.
So I think going back to your question about artificial intelligence, there is a lot of work going on at how we can, say, increase the flexibility and the abilities of robots, and a lot of work going into how that works alongside humans, so that robots work with us rather than against us, or even just for us. And that requires the robots to have a much greater deal of understanding of the world, ability to learn, ability to adapt to changes in the environment. And I see, going back to this point of humans and robots truly collaborating in very flexible, adaptable tasks, I think AI is going to bring a lot of power to that and enable that to happen.
It's the next big step, I think, isn't it? That seems what we think. Well, thanks, James. Thanks for joining us. That's all for this week. Join us next time when we have another interesting guest from the world of robotics.